What's up, guys? It's the Four Horsemen Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Josh Romine. Hop on Twitter, follow us at the Four Horsemen Pod. Get on, send us emails, fourhorsemenpod@gmail.com. With me tonight, I got all the regulars. I got Alex the Vinny Stoner. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. This is the best podcast of the year. Talking about some running backs.
It's like Christmas to you, so I know you're excited. I
love it.
Got Joshua Van Cleve. How are you, Joshua?
Hey.
And we got Brent Auker. Hello, Brent.
Hey, how's it going? I think it's more like Halloween to me.
Halloween?
It's spooky how good this is going to be.
That was terrible.
Look at it was
so
beautiful.
Terrible.
It was beautiful. I love it.
Hashtag dad jokes.
Dad jokes.
I'm proud of you for bringing it out. But something that we kind of talked about last week that I want to do, the first person to get on and send me an email at fourhorsemenpod@gmail.com will be the new proud owner of a Four Horsemen podcast koozie that my wife and kids gave me for Father's Day. They gave me 12 of them. These things are limited edition.
You will get one before any of the other Four Horsemen get it.
Yes.
True.
Absolutely.
We don't even have one yet.
Yeah.
So get on your email, send me an email, say, I heard this, and tell me where to send it to. I don't care if it's a P.O. box. It can be your mom's house. I don't care where it's at. I will send it to you.
And ask a question. Anybody. Just ask it. Like, we have people listening to the podcast, and honestly, our numbers have been getting like increasingly better and better, but nobody wants to talk to us.
Yes.
Nobody.
You're there, listeners. We know you're there. You're listening. We see the downloads every week.
Make sure to give us a rating and a review.
Yeah.
Just go on there. It's not that, even just give us a rating. We'd like to hear from you guys. We love to hear if you have any questions, even if it's about, something about your dog or something. We'll answer it.
Do you have any issues with your Tinder account? I can help you out.
Alex is a Tinder pro.
Yeah.
He's basically killing it on there right now. So.
Oh, I'm killing it. I put up new pictures from the Columbus trip. All my pictures are me interacting with bronze statues, and honestly, it's been doing bonkers for me. I don't have a date yet, but I have a possible date next week that I will be partaking in. So I'm pretty excited about that. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, congratulations on your Tinder experiences.
Thank you.
Let's get into this podcast, guys. We're going to be doing our running back rankings. I don't know if we're going to have to split this into two. I think we're just going to kind of see how this one goes. I ranked down to like 84. Brent did like a top 90. I think you guys were right around 50. So I don't know how far we'll get into it.
Past 50.
Are you?
I've got 71.
Oh, sorry. Didn't give you enough credit. Was it Van Cleve that was at like 50?
I got 55. I got tired. I just all these guys about the same after that.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, and even you, Romine, you and Brent actually tiered some of those bottom guys. Like you have a couple tiers lower. Honestly, after a certain point, they're all the same.
Yeah,
there's no real tier. Like, I don't know.
And I could just kind of broke them up where I thought I saw like a little bit of a divide, but I totally get what you're saying. But we'll start at the top and we'll just work our way down. A lot of those top guys, we've talked about before, so it may not be as exciting, but I think that we can make it some good conversation still. We all have David Johnson number one, except for Brent, who has Le'Veon Bell. I think it's kind of a coin flip. I don't know how you guys feel. Yeah. Do you really think there's that much difference between?
No.
And see, that's honestly Oh, go ahead, VC.
Oh, no, go ahead. You finish what you're saying.
What I was just saying that's why I have a tier of those two guys by themselves, because to me, those guys are the two guys. I think that Zeke takes a slight step back. I'm not saying that it changes his status as an elite back, somebody that you want, but I think even just a little bit of a step back because the surprise is gone. But I think that David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, they are their own tier, and then Zeke, I have him ranked fourth, but legitimately I think Zeke is probably the start of that next tier for most people. But you're looking at David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell first. I don't think anybody really is looking at Zeke as a possible number one pick, and that's why I separated it like that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like a standard league or a dynasty. I don't know. I've seen some people put Zeke up there, but I think you're right. Like David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell are just a little bit more proven. Zeke looked really good last year, and if Dallas actually does start throwing him the ball like they've talked about this offseason, he could jump right up into that same conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there any scenario that you guys see as with Zeke being the number 1 or number 2 pick, non-injury related to Le'Veon Bell or David Johnson?
Are you saying, do you see a situation where he ends up being the number 1 running back?
I'm just saying not ends up, but is there a way that you would draft Ezekiel Elliott over those other 2 if it had nothing to do with injury?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I say dynasty.
And like even in dynasty, though,
but David Johnson's a year older.
No, I get that. I'm just saying there. But look at the situation that Zeke's saying with the offensive line that they have, and this will be sticking around. It's a young team that they want to run the ball. I'm just saying that the usage from what he's going to get is there, and so I'm not. I mean, I think David Johnson is just. I mean, I think he's better, but I'm just saying that if there's a scenario, I could see Zeke going 1 in dynasty.
I see. Honestly, I would say the exact opposite of what you're saying, because right now Zeke has the best situation he's going to have his entire career. It's literally only downhill from here with that situation. Not necessarily his talent and his skills and his production, but from that situation, he will not always have that line. David Johnson doesn't really have a great line, so if his line gets better, he could theoretically get better. I think that when you're going after these guys, you're actually buying Zeke at the highest he possibly could be because his situation is so perfect. It's so amazing. I think David Johnson actually has kind of a crap situation. He's got an old quarterback. Their passing game wasn't really on point, and he was the entire offense, and they still couldn't stop him. Imagine if that team was better. Like, imagine if they were a better team.
Look at how much he gets used. Like David Johnson is utilized so much in that offense, Alex. Like that's the thing. Like it's not the best situation looking at as like an NFL player. He could have a better line, better weapons around him. But as far as like a utilization, it does not get any better than what the Cardinals do with David Johnson. They line him up. They use him in the backfield. The dude gets tons of touches. The only thing I worry about with David Johnson is him holding up with injury. And I think that's a legitimate concern like Brent brought up. That's the only way I could see Zeke getting pushed ahead. But give me another year of Zeke doing what he did last year, and then we can have that conversation. I think right now he's just done it once. There's no way that you can convince me to put him ahead of those 2 with what they've done.
Playing devil's advocate, theoretically, David Johnson's only done it once too. I mean, like David Johnson had a great end of the year, his rookie year, but last year was his first year of being like legitimately okay. He was pushed to the top, and honestly, Zeke, we're drafting him 3. Most people were drafting him 5 last year, so even like they were both way up at the top with not a lot of proof, and so we're kind of saying, okay, they had 2 amazing years. We're hoping they do it again, but there's still questions, honestly, for either one of them.
And that's kind of why I put Le'Veon Bell ahead of both of those guys in my ranks. I have him as number 1, but I think it more has to do with, he was on pace to outdo David Johnson last year if it wasn't for that 3-4 game suspension at the beginning of the season. So and we have a much more proven track record with Le'Veon Bell in that Pittsburgh offense with all the returning pieces. Le'Veon Bell a full season, that could be huge.
Yeah. Well, I think it was 2 games, right? They was suspended last year.
That might have been, yeah.
And he still caught it was like 76 balls.
Yeah, and he didn't even play the last week of the season either. So
he is a beast, but he's also one off the field incident away from being suspended the full year. So
there is that risk.
There's that too, and then I also think that there's some friction between the team and him as well. So that's something to be watching out for because I know they're trying to look to sign him long term, and that's not coming to fruition.
I mean, can you blame them for not wanting to sign him long term? Like he's great, but like I just said, he's one mishap away from that investment being for nothing.
James
I'm not saying I can't
becoming a starting running back.
Yeah. Look out.
I could totally see that. So we kind of define that tier then. I know, Alex, you don't really put him in with that next group of guys. And I think that next group of guys is pretty similar. It's the Sean McCoys, the Melvin Gordons, the Jay Ajays, Jordan Howard, DeMarco Murray. Some of us put Devontae Freeman up in there. What do you guys think of that next tier? Is it that much different from those top three, or?
It's different. I think that you're looking at slight reduction in overall usage. Even though McCoy is basically the center point of that entire offense, they just aren't as good of a team. So you don't have quite the same production. DeMarco Murray, you're almost betting he's going to miss a couple of games. Jay Ajayi, right now, you're kind of sitting at the same spot where you were last year with a couple of guys trying to figure out what is he. Is he going to be, that next guy that we're talking about as, are we going to be adding him into the tier, that is going to be a tier of 4 next year? Like, that's kind of what we're looking at with the Jai. Kind of the same feelings that you maybe had after that big year for Devontae Freeman. Like, what am I going to see this year? Personally, I love Jordan Howard. I don't put him in that tier. I think there are still question marks, and that's why I have him in a tier with Jordan, or I have Jordan Howard with Lamar Miller, Devontae Freeman, and Fournette, because there are some questions for me, and I put them slightly farther down just because of those questions. I think Melvin Gordon, he's kind of the center point of the team, so he belongs in that second tier. DeMarco Murray, even with injuries, he's going to get the ball. He's going to get catches. So I look at those next guys, like, if you can't get those other guys, those first few guys, you still got a quality back.
That's what I like about this second tier is you have the workhorse capability of each of these running backs that we just named, but they are the centerpiece of the offense. They might not be that elite, like top 3 kind of guy, but I do feel like they could give you that top 3 production because they are that centerpiece of each of those offenses.
Week to week, especially. I mean, those guys can be the best running back in the NFL that particular week. You know what I mean?
Yep, sure.
They might not finish top 3, but they will finish maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks. They can finish in the top 3 that week.
It wouldn't really surprise anybody if they did that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if there's really that much difference from what Jordan Howard did last year compared to what Zeke did as far as like their talent levels. That's kind of why I bumped Jordan Howard up. And what does Chicago have, like, other than Jordan Howard now?
See,
but he's going to get the ball.
That's what kind of scares me.
Volume there, so
right.
There's volume. I'm just worried that is he good enough? Like, okay, with David Johnson, he's so good that even when they were stacking the box, they couldn't stop him. But is Jordan Howard that good? And that's what we're going to see this year. And that's where I'm a little nervous about him. I love him, but I'm nervous because I don't think he's elite. I don't know if he can handle that pressure. And that's what I'm concerned and wanting to see this year.
So where would you be targeting him?
I mean, it definitely back into the first round. You know my style. I'm not going to draft a wide receiver in the first round. I just don't think that it's wise to do so. And so, he'll trickle down to me, probably at the end of the first. If I can get him at if I can get, let's say, a Melvin Gordon and then get Jordan Howard at the turn going into the second, I feel amazing about my team. Absolutely amazing.
Well, kind of what I wanted to ask you, Alex, was where do you feel comfortable? Not even comfortable, but where do you draft that first wide receiver then? Like at your quarterback or looking at your running backs, where do you kind of make that distinction?
Honestly, when we're coming around, I'm looking at these guys here. Once I get past Jordan Howard, I'm making a decision. Do I want a Lamar Miller? Or do I want, I guess we're probably looking at maybe the 5th or 6th wide receiver off the board. And then I'm kind of looking, okay, when it comes back around, what kind of guys what am I going to be looking at? And really, what I'm going to be looking at coming back around is the Carlos Hydes, the Eddie Lacy's, C.J. Anderson. I'm not big on those guys. So more likely than not, my draft strategy, I'm not getting a wide receiver until the 3rd round.
Right.
That's just how I play.
Like, say there were guys like you drafting, and the first 4 picks were all running backs. Like, somebody really did. They went David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Zeke, and LaShawn McCoy. Are you going to be able to look at your draft sheet, see DeMarco Murray there, and take him over a guy like Brown or Julio Jones? Or
Yeah, honestly, probably. And the simple reason is because I know the depth at wide receiver. I know that I can get wide receivers in back ends of drafts to kind of fill in. I can't get anybody to replace a DeMarco Murray. I'm not replacing DeMarco Murray with Carlos Hyde. I'm just not. And so that's something that you kind of have to figure out now. And personally, I don't even like going after a wide receiver and then in the 2nd round getting a running back, because I still feel like then I'm still grabbing in the 3rd round one of those guys I don't like. And that's where but again, that's more style of play than anything else. Like if you are more about wide receivers and you like wide receivers more, you're going to tend to lean toward wide receivers. It's just the style of which you want to play.
And you got to take the
really
draft
don't think
how
there's
it
a wrong
goes,
way.
like too. I'm not advocating for your strategy, but for you, I think it'll work out this year, Alex, just because of that depth at the top end of the running back class. But let's just say the top 7 running backs and top 4 wide receivers are gone, and it's your pick on that turn, the 12 and the 13 pick there. I mean, you have to make that choice. Do I take the 8th best running back, or do I take the 5th best wide receiver? I mean, and you're going to take running back in that case, but that'd be worst case scenario. But I'm not advocating for it at all. But you gotta take the draft how it goes too. You don't want to go into it with one set strategy that you're going to draft a running back at the certain spot, or draft a wide receiver at a certain spot.
No, I completely agree, and I wouldn't do it that way either. I'm just saying that, like, how this is shaking out, what I'm looking at right now is I'm looking at, if I were to go heavier with the wide receivers up front, I'm going to be getting players I just don't feel comfortable with. I don't feel comfortable with a Marshawn Lynch, Isaiah Crowell, C.J. Anderson as my number 1. So I just, it does change year to year. So if the running backs get a little deeper, and honestly, like there are these tiers we're talking about here. I prefer, maybe a 5th or 6th tier to the 3rd, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it has more to do with the value that you're getting those players at.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. Looking at your list of like your guys' kind of 2nd tier players, which one do you think carries the most concern? Like, which one would you drop?
Devontae Freeman.
Yeah.
For me.
Why
it's one of those guys where, for a second year he showed up decent, but it's one of those where for a few weeks he'll explode to you, and then he'll kind of disappear. And then the usage of between him and Tevin Coleman, and they use Tevin Coleman in the passing game a lot more, so his usage is not as high. And you don't feel comfortable with him because they're not necessarily granting him the full workload.
He's not a workhorse.
And
he's not a workhorse.
Yeah, exactly. And so when these 2nd tier guys, you kind of expect him to be. Now I have him up there in that 2nd tier because of the last 2 years he's been putting up those numbers like a workhorse. But it's just one of those guys where he's on that edge where he kind of scares me because you're not sure if he's going to be able to get the ball all the time like he did the years past. So it just – I don't know. I just kind of scared me with that. And I put him above Jordan Howard because Jordan Howard was his rookie year last year. And I just scared to put him above too high because I'm not sure if he's going to come back and do what he has because he's on a worse team.
Yeah.
But I think Devontae Freeman, as far as all those guys, I would drop out of that 2nd tier for me. You guys don't even have Devontae Freeman in your 2nd tier.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks surrounding him because you actually have a quality running back right behind him that could take over that job at any point in time. And that's where I think getting into that tier 3 of running backs, that's where all the question marks start coming into play for me. is there's at least one question mark with my tier 3 running backs. But as far as the tier 2 goes, if I was to pick one, I would say Jordan Howard, which we've kind of covered a little bit already, just because I think he could have that Todd Gurley kind of sophomore slump where people just stack the box. But I have him at the very back end of my tier 2 running backs. So I think he's going to be a running back 1 just based on volume, and he's pretty much the only offensive weapon on Chicago. So by default, I think he could finish as a running back 1.
And you know what? I think that if Todd Gurley wouldn't have happened last year the way it did, we would probably be higher on Jordan Howard this year.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big reason that we've kind of dropped him down a little bit. All of us had Todd Gurley up in that top 3 with he was number 1 in a lot of dynasty rankings. Yep. And now people saw that happen and they're like, well, pump the brakes on Jordan Howard there. Like we've seen this shit before. Like he can completely kind of hurt your fantasy team if you draft him that high, which I like that.
But at the same time, people see Ezekiel Elliott's season last year, and they're wanting to draft these rookie running backs a lot higher too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hey guys, I did not rank Todd Gurley.
Where would you put him?
He would be, honestly, he would probably be in that tier with Jordan Howard, Lamar Miller, Devontae Freeman, and Leonard Fournette. Gotcha. I don't know how I did that, but yeah, he needs to be out of there.
It happens. So, Alex, what I was going to say is, which one of your players you kind of feel the same way, or?
Well, okay, so tier 3, I am nervous about. I have four players in tier 3, which is Jordan Howard, Lamar Miller, Devontae Freeman, and Leonard Fournette. I have concerns about 3 of them, and then I have one that I think could actually be a tier 2, and that's Leonard Fournette. Because we've just been talking about the amount of usage they're going to get. I have this feeling that Leonard Fournette is going to get a lot of work, and there are guys there. There's Yeldon, there's Ivory, but they went out and they got, the best on paper guy, even though they had these other guys. So they're going to use him. And we've talked about Jordan Howard and we've talked about Devontae Freeman, but to kind of answer your question, Lamar Miller's scary still. Lamar Miller is a player we have been talking about for years this is going to be his year. This is going to be his year. Look, he's averaging 5 yards per carry. So obviously he's going to be good. At some point, and this is probably the year, if he doesn't do it, we have to move on. We have to just put it out of mind that he's going to be, this top 5 guy, because right now, I've got him ranked top 10. And if he isn't a guy that's at least somewhat consistent, he's going to fall out of that. And and honestly, Houston probably will need to move on at some point.
Absolutely. And I'm with you. Like, that's how I feel about him too. I've been the biggest Lamar Miller advocator for the last couple of years. Like, I love the guy, but this is it for me. If he can't do it now with the team that Houston has, with getting a good young quarterback in there, hopefully, I'm hoping that they don't just roll Savage out there for the whole year, but that they give Watson a chance. I can't do it. You can't invest a top pick in him. Like, and you can't feel good about it.
Yeah.
Now, if he was back to like the 4th or 5th round and you're able to lock him in, I'd feel a lot better about it. But right now, you're still having to invest, like a 3rd probably in him, somewhere around there, late 2nd, depending on how you're drafting. What do you guys think the real chances of Leonard Fournette being that tier 2 for you, Alex? Like that running back that just really shows up and does like kind of what Zeke did last year. Brent?
I think he needs an offensive line first. I know they've improved it over the offseason, but I don't think it's where it needs to be. I do think he's going to open up that offense quite a bit, though. Blake Bortles is a terrible quarterback. He makes a lot of mistakes. And with Leonard Fournette, if you hand him the ball all day, give him 20 rushes a game, I think it's going to relieve that pressure. A lot less turnovers. They're going to score a lot more times, less garbage time. They've got a good defense. So I think Leonard Fournette has the ability to be in that top tier 2, but it just depends on that offensive line and how much production he can get.
Well, and I hope that their passing game can come back to somewhat like they did 2 years ago. I know they were down, and so that's why some of his stats were stacked. But if you work on his fundamentals and actually make better decisions when he's passing the ball, and actually make the passing game a threat to defenses, so they won't have to just stack the box or anything like that, which I think they have a good enough talent as far as on the outsides that could offset that. So I really think it could open up the running game for him. So I think it could be a legitimate thing, as long as, like what Brent's saying, as long as the line will help block, and then if the passing game can get going to help open up that running game, which I think it's vice versa. The running game will help open the passing game, and then the passing game. But what worries me about the passing game is if Blake Bortles makes smart decisions when he's throwing.
I'm kind of looking at it. It's like, okay, but legitimately, is Fournette a better prototypical running back than Devontae Freeman, Jordan Howard, Jay Ajayi, Melvin Gordon? And I think that he has a little bit more power to him than those guys. Now, I don't know how that's going to translate as far as, the game with, there was some weird sound that just made like this weird bird sound, and I totally lost my train of thought. Anyway, but like, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for touchdowns, especially for Fournette. And I know that you don't want to rely on touchdowns, but that it's a possibility that he could end up with a lot of touchdowns, in short yardage situations.
So let me ask you a question just about Leonard Fournette in general. With his upside, do you think it's limited because of TJ Yeldon and Chris Ivory still there? I understand he's going to be the lead back, but as far as touches and maybe in PPR leagues, do you think his fantasy value is diminished because of those other two running backs being there?
I think that, the fantasy value of both of those guys was pretty low last year, and it gets even lower this year. So I really wouldn't worry about it.
So you shouldn't worry about any receptions being taken away from him? I mean, Yeldon seems like more of the pass-catching back.
Well, I mean, it will be something that you need to watch out for, and I think that, I'm not sure where exactly he's being taken, but what's his ADP right now? Does anybody have that open?
I can pull it up if you keep talking.
Okay. I mean, because I'm, depending on where you're getting him, if you're getting him around the Devontae Freeman, area, then you're already making a decision of, do you want a guy that loses touches to a third down back, essentially.
So like, you talking Fournette, right? What his ADP is. So Devontae Freeman's actually going on Fantasy Football Calculator. Devontae Freeman's going at the end of the first round. Leonard Fournette's going in about the middle of the second. He's 20th overall.
But see, I think that there's more opportunity for Fournette to score touchdowns than there is for Freeman, because Freeman's going to have to get them in, I think longer yard situations. He's going to have to break one to get the touchdown. Whereas I think that they're going to be using Fournette a lot in goal line situations and things like that. And it'll be interesting to see how they actually spread that out.
So, I mean, Fournette, that was one of the biggest concerns coming out, is because LSU didn't really pass the ball. So his pass catching abilities, that was somewhat of concern that people had. So he wouldn't be a pass catcher. He'd just be mainly the power back. And then throw that TJ Yeldon in there. And then we'll find out closer to training camp to see how he's picking up that offense, because if he may have just TJ Yeldon doing it in the third down role. And I think Ivory is not that big of a threat because of his injury history and him being kind of that backup guy, but I could see him getting injured as well and not being a real factor to it. But Yeldon maybe gets some of those passings in the early on in the season. I think maybe taking those away until Fournette can be proven.
I'm not worried about TJ Yeldon at all. Like, I have zero concern about him taking work away from Fournette. I think Jacksonville kind of proved that he wasn't what they wanted. I don't think that he was what they expected to get when they drafted him to begin with. He had a decent rookie year, But then last year he was just kind of a garbage fire.
What is going on?
way worse, Brent.
What?
Whatever you're doing, don't do that anymore. Josh, you may have to actually edit this part out. You may have to do your first editing of the actual podcast. But
weird.
Go ahead. What?
As I say, I turned the fan off and it got worse.
Yeah, it got really, really loud because you didn't mute yourself first, I'm assuming.
Well, okay, so surprisingly, so last year, TJ Yeldon had 68 targets in the passing game and 50 receptions.
Yeah.
But for like 312 yards.
Yeah, I was going to say he had 130 rushes for 465 yards. So
yeah, so I mean, I'm surprised at that many receptions he's got. He only had 312 yards. So they were either in short yard situations or he couldn't break a tackle or and get any contact, yards after contact.
He was kind of just garbage. Like he's one of those second round running backs that in 5 years you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, he was second round. That's crazy.
Well, what I guess I'm getting at is he had 68 targets, and so obviously Fournette's going to eat into most of that. But you could still see him taking away some of those targets in the passing game. That's all I'm trying to get at. I don't think TJ Yeldon is going to contend for the running back, but just if they'll bring in somebody for the third down if they want to relieve Fournette and something like that. And especially, I think earlier on in the season until he gets a little more comfortable with the game flow and everything with that. I don't know. That's just what I'm kind of thinking. But I could see Fournette totally dominating and show once he proves that he can catch the ball.
And what would be really awesome is if Leonard Fournette comes out and proves that he can actually catch the ball. I don't think they're going to want to pull him out on third down. So I think that he's going to get the opportunity to see if he can catch, because what Jacksonville really needs to do this year is prolong drives. That's what they're going to be looking to do is, make their drives longer and not put that defense out on the field as much as – because that defense has been talked about. We talk about almost every episode how much improved it's supposed to be. They want to limit their time out there as well. Like that's going to help their defense not having to run around as much. So if they can get – Fournette to get out there and get 5 yards on a first down, that puts him in a much better position than an incomplete pass on first down.
And another thing is because of his size, he's not going to be taken out on short yardage situations. So you've got a guy that is a workhorse. We're just going to have to see if they're going to use him as a workhorse. And that's what we're getting at. And if they are an improved team, and they can start moving the ball, they aren't going to take him out because they don't need to. They're going to be working with, 3rd and 3. So they're going to keep him out there to keep, things, them looking at the run as a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Well, I think that's a lot of good Leonard Fournette talk because he's probably the most exciting rookie. When you get down to our next tier of players is where you see the Joe Mixon, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cooks, players like that. You look at that list, and this is kind of where the players start coming in that aren't starters necessarily. Like Joe Mixon, we have pretty high in our rankings. I think based solely on potential. There's still Giovanni Bernard still there. He's a little banged up, but Jeremy Hill, who's been a garbage fire, is still there. I don't know if – what has Cincinnati really even said about Mixon? Has anybody seen any? Yeah,
they love him. Everything I've seen, beat reporters, coaches, running back coach, they love what Joe Mixon's done. When he first got to like OTAs and rookie minicamp and stuff, they said he was a little overweight. He's already lost all that weight now. He's in shape. He's running routes and everything. The thing I've been noticing though is them talking about everyone other than Joe Mixon. Like I haven't heard a thing about Jeremy Hill, and you could take that in a good way or a bad way.
Sure.
But another thing is Giovanni Bernard. I'm hearing he might miss the start of the season. Yeah. Could even be the PUP list. I mean, he's coming off that ACL injury, so that automatically, I think, puts Joe Mixon in the third down role at least.
Yeah.
He's going to steal touches from Jeremy Hill, but he's going to steal the beginning of the season work from Giovanni Bernard, and he has an excellent route tree and pass catching ability for a running back. So I'm really excited to see what Joe Mixon can do at the beginning of the season, which might open up more later on down the line.
I would be shocked if Mixon doesn't beat Hill out to start the season.
Yeah, how could he not beat Jeremy Hill?
I would be absolutely shocked.
Yeah. There's reports coming out. I mean, he's even like training with Adrian Peterson this summer and stuff. And so I really think that he's really trying to focus on coming out and be excelling because, of his past. And they're going to run the ball, especially with that offensive with what they have as far as in that backfield, and they're going to want to run the ball. And I think with Bernard going to be missing some of that time because of his ACL, I could see definitely because I want to see Mixon or Bernard taking away in the passing game, and Hill just I don't know. I kind of feel like the same thing where he's kind of that guy that is going to be forgotten.
And I know I'm going to butcher this stat, but I read somewhere that the Cincinnati running backs have been a top 10 in the red zone as far as touches are concerned. Running backs in the red zone, touches, top 10 each of the last 3 years. Huh. So that's even better for Joe Mixon, even with how terrible Jeremy Hill's been and how injury prone and terrible Giovanni Bernard's been. It's a top 10 in touches, so they're going to get the ball in the red zone.
Yeah, and that's I think just that Joe Mixon excitement, like the comps to Le'Veon Bell and what he could do, and like when you envision what Cincinnati could use him as, it's pretty exciting. Where do you feel comfortable drafting him? Like if you're sitting in the draft, when do you start thinking?
Yeah. He keeps creeping up in these drafts, and I think he's right at like the beginning of the third round now. And I love it for upside, but I'm just not comfortable drafting probably my second running back right there at the beginning of the third in Joe Mixon. I think there's other guys I'd be more comfortable with immediate production, I guess, unless he's named the clear-cut starter.
Well, what about Fournette? I mean, do you think that those two guys are comparable, or do you think that Fournette just blows them out of the water? Because, I mean, Fournette's going in the middle of the second, whereas Mixon's going in the third, and so some guys are drafting Fournette as their number one if they're drafting wide receivers right there.
I think there's a huge fantasy difference between Leonard Fournette right now than Joe Mixon. We'll see what happens after training camp, see who emerges as maybe the starter, but
right.
I think there's a big enough difference between middle of the second round, beginning of the third round between those two guys that I'd want to wait on Mixon a little more.
Here's just kind of a random question that I was just thinking about. Okay, if you had to pick one or the other, and like this, you wanted to think about the value part of this. You get Joe Mixon in the third round, or you get Samjay Pirine in the 12th. Like you can only have one or the other. Which one do you get?
Me personally, I think he's just asking us all. So I'll go ahead and jump in there. But I would probably lean more towards Pirine in the 12th, especially if it's an early third. If it was a late third, like if I'm turning into the fourth, I could maybe talk myself more into Mixon there. But just in the 12th round, what do you have to lose? Like,
I feel
it's basically a throwaway pick at that point. So.
Well, see, what the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's a very similar situation. You've got, two incumbents that are not really special. There's nothing about them. Now, I think that Jeremy Hill is like more hated by their team than Rob Kelly, but I think that when I'm looking at these guys, like I love Mixon, but you're paying so much for him.
Yep.
It like regardless, you're doing auction, you're doing a standard draft, whatever. You're using a lot to get Mixon. When I think that Pirine has the ability to do the same kind of things,
Absolutely. I mean, in projection wise, as far as stats are concerned, I think people are projecting Mixon to get right around that 900 yard range, maybe like 6-7 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And P Ryan, it's about the exact same, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's a little bit lower, but when you're talking about a 9-round difference,
Yeah.
for maybe 100 yards less and a touchdown less, I mean, 9 rounds. I think I'd lean more towards P Ryan also.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it, and I was like, when you really break it down, I don't know. I think that Mixon's overall value is becoming less and less and less because you're investing a lot in a guy that, as of right now, does not have a starting job and theoretically is the number 3 running back.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, so essentially then what if he does get named a starter?
Well, then he's going to be, probably a second round pick.
Yep.
I mean, even more so. Now, yes, now that's different because he's named the starter, but I mean, I'm looking at some of these players and seeing, where the actual value lies. And right now, one of the least valuable players is Joe Mixon. Like, sorry, I said that wrong. He has the least, bang for your buck of probably any player because you don't know really what you're getting. He's not at the top of the depth chart, but he's still going as if he is a starter and could be your number 1 guy.
In terms of like return on your investment,
yes,
it's a little bit harder to ensure that you're getting your return with Joe Mixon.
So theoretically, if Joe Mixon is named starter, Leonard Fournette's starter, who are you drafting first?
Joe Mixon.
I draft Fournette personally. Mixon still scares me a little bit. There's still that unknown about him that makes me a little nervous. Like, he could be Le'Veon Bell, but he could also not be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. There's just, to me, there's something about Mixon that I just am gravitating toward. And that's why I brought that question up because P. Ryan has been, kind of talked about, not like a light version of Joe Mixon, but a lot of the same capabilities. He's just lower down because he's not the name. So I don't know. I'm a really big Joe Mixon fan. I'm probably just not going to end up getting a lot of stock in him because of where he's going.
You're going to have to reach to take him.
Yeah.
And I think the P. Ryan talk has kind of cooled a little bit. I feel like right after the draft, it was a real big hype. But Rob Kelly, from what I've heard, like through OTAs, he's doing everything that he can to keep that job, and he wants to keep it.
I will say that if you're looking to have, a backfield locked up, the P. Ryan and Rob Kelly, there's a little bit more investment because honestly, you could get Mixon and you don't even have to draft Jeremy Hill because you could pick him up on waivers.
I had that scenario happen in a mock draft earlier today. It was the 10th and 11th round pick, and P. Ryan and Rob Kelly were right there, and I had the opportunity to take both of them on a turn.
Yeah.
You think that's good value at the 10 and 11th pick?
Absolutely.
Where they're kind of going?
I think so.
I do. Yeah, you talk about like ROI, like return on your investment. You're not investing very much in that. Even if you're taking 2 picks, you're taking 2 crapshoot picks and putting them into something that you know is going to be a starting running back.
Yeah. Yep.
You can just play, and that's looking at the fantasy football calculator. Rob Kelly and Samaje Perine are almost exactly the same.
Yep.
They're 87th and 89th. So I think that you're going to see that a lot in drafts, getting to that 8th, 9th, 10th round, and both those guys are sitting there. And I think that is a really good play, and especially if you take one of those running backs, like you were talking about, Alex, even one of your top 10 guys at your turn in the first, then load up on some of those higher-end wide receivers in the 2nd through 4th round, and then you're going to have those guys that you can fill in as an RB2.
I am going to say one thing, though, about if you were – let's say you had the you didn't have the 12-1 pick or the 1-12 pick, whatever it is. And you're looking at a turn and you're saying, okay, I want both these guys. I want Rob Kelly and I want P. Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go Rob Kelly first.
Yeah.
Go P. Ryan first, because if you go Rob Kelly, that's going to clue in whoever is in between the picks that you're going at. So if you're, you've got the 11th pick and the 2nd pick, or, whatever, they're going to be looking at that and say, you know what? I don't think Rob Kelly's going to be playing the whole time, so I'm going to go after P. Ryan. If you go after P. Ryan, they're going to think, well, that's kind of the sexier pick. Do I really want the guy that might end up losing his job? Meh. And you'll probably get him. So
right.
I think that's one thing that you want to kind of look at, is that if you were legitimately doing that, and I think you're right, I think that's a possibility in some drafts, go P. Ryan first and then come back and get Rob Kelly if that's how it's laying out.
That makes me feel so good that you say that.
Well, I mean, but do you think I'm wrong, Brent?
No, and also what you're saying is true in regards to draft strategy, because you can almost trick some of the other people that maybe Rob Kelly already went off the board way earlier in the draft because he's technically the starter.
Well, that's Brent, and Alex, I think that's a great point. I think that's really good advice too. If you're looking at two guys and you think you might have to reach on them, always reach for the sexier of them. Reach for the bigger name. Even if the value you have it ranked a little bit different, maybe you have the other guy ahead of the other one, take that sexier name, because if people see that other guy come off first, they're gonna be like, oh, I want the sexier of the two names. I'm gonna go ahead and steal it from him.
You might have the exact same situation with Spencer Ware, and
Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt. You might have the exact same kind of situation with that, because they're kind of closely ranked as well. And again, when you look at that, I think that you want to go Kareem Hunt, let it come back around to you, and grab Spencer Ware, because those guys were drafted essentially to compete with a guy they're not really sure about. And so those guys have jobs to lose. The other guys have jobs to gain. And I think that you want to keep that kind of in perspective a little bit.
Then, so another rookie, Christian McCaffrey, that we've kind of cooled off on a little bit as well, maybe since the draft. You're looking at him and Jonathan Stewart. Christian McCaffrey, we all have ranked in between 14th and 18th. And Jonathan Stewart, I haven't really looked at your guys' rankings to see where he's at down there. But how do you feel about that situation?
Well, so I was thinking about this because we were talking about Joe Mixon. Right now, Christian McCaffrey is being drafted before Joe Mixon. And that's another one of those situations where he hasn't been named the starter, but people are assuming that he has a role. And so the talent from, what you've seen from the combine and everything, and from his college senior year, people are drafting him pretty high over Joe Mixon, which Joe Mixon had a higher, it has more of a talent, or, people feel he has more talent than McCaffrey. So it's one of those things where McCaffrey's going way before Jonathan Stewart. I can't remember when Jonathan Stewart's going. I think because McCaffrey's going around like 30th overall. And then Jonathan Stewart's like 98th.
Yeah,
That's so much of a difference when Jonathan Stewart is probably going to start as a starter. They re-signed him as a veteran.
I feel like they're such different players, though, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think they're going to do different roles. And I don't know what they're going to. They may be using him for everything on that team. But with them doing that, do you see more fantasy value in him then? Since they're using him
in Stewart or McCaffrey?
McCaffrey, since they're using him for you think that they're going to use him for a lot of different roles.
Well,
as of right now, that's what we assume.
I'm worried that he's going to be a Reggie Bush. In that offense, I'm worried that he's just going to be a Reggie Bush. And so if you've got PPR, that's great. And you know what? I bet you that he has the chance to maybe catch 60 balls this year. The problem is that what I wanted him to do was go to a team that would utilize him as a runner and as a passer. And I don't think they're going to do that in Carolina.
Let me ask you a question, though. I think what the more important question is, do you guys think that Christian McCaffrey has the capability of being a three-down back? Do you think he has it in him?
Yes.
Yep.
I think so.
Then I think we're okay ranking him there. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if this was the intent of what you were bringing up, but what I was looking at is our discussion that we were talking about, where you're going after handcuffs. I don't think that Jonathan Stewart or vice versa, however you want to say it, is a handcuff to Christian McCaffrey, because I think Christian McCaffrey is a different player. Just the same as you wouldn't get Darren Sproles to be the handcuff to LeGarrette Blount.
Right.
I just think they're different players and they do different things.
I don't think that Christian McCaffrey can compare to Darren Sproles, but I see what you're saying.
I get that. Yeah, I'm not saying that he's Darren Sproles. I'm saying that the two players aren't. Yeah.
Because you're going to get fantasy. That's what I was trying to say. You're going to get fantasy value out of Christian McCaffrey, no matter if he's a starter or not. And I think that's why he's going so high. But I thought it was interesting because he's in a similar situation, I guess, where he hasn't been named as a starter, but we're just assuming that he's already going to take that role on.
Well,
you draft a running back in the first round in 2017. I mean, if he's not going to be your starter, then you made a horrible decision.
Right.
But
I agree.
Here's the thing. I agree with that, but it's like Jonathan Stewart wasn't that horrible of a running back in that system.
But he wasn't a playmaker.
No. But
I think they need more playmakers outside of Cam Newton. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just don't know, like, for this year, because he re-signed him. I think, was it 1 year deal? Was that right?
Jonathan Stewart?
Yeah.
I haven't even paid attention to Jonathan
Stewart.
Well,
they re-signed a contract with him, and so at least when he comes back for at least this year, he's going to be a vital role in somewhere or somehow in that offense.
Yeah,
and he knows the system, but it's like where I keep like backtracking because like it's the same situation as like he's not named a starter, so his value is high. But then yes, I still think that he's a versatile player that he can have fantasy value elsewhere along with Jonathan Stewart. So it's like one of those like catch. I don't know if it's catch too, but
Carolina signed Jonathan Stewart to a 1 year, $8 million deal with $3.6 million guaranteed.
Yeah,
so. I don't know if it's really that big an investment. Like,
it's what the going rate for a running back right now is.
But here's the thing: is that last year, just looking at his stats real quick, he had just a little over 800 yards, and he was only rushing for 3.8 yards per carry. The only reason he was fantasy relevant was his 9 touchdowns. So, I mean, he's been on a downward trend anyway. I think they just re-signed him because they're trying to keep some of those pieces there so that they can make their transition. So they're not just throwing a new guy into a system and have no real backup because, they don't have much. And that's been a problem with Carolina for a few years now is that outside of Cam Newton, they don't really have a great running game.
What, you don't think Fozzie? The Foz Bear?
I don't even want to talk about Fozzie. I don't even want to talk about Fozzie.
Did you have a hard-on for him at one point?
Yes, and then Brent told me that he was starting. I got excited. I put him in, and I think he ended up with 0 carries.
It's typical Brent for you, by the way.
Classic.
Get you all excited for it.
God, I was so jacked up because I wanted a guy named Fozzie to be good.
So do you guys think that do you see yourself ending up kind of the same way that you feel about Joe Mixon with Christian McCaffrey, that you have to reach up a little bit too high to get him? Like, do you see him being on many of your fantasy teams? Because I feel like he's still kind of going that same round, like around the end of the third, mid-third, somewhere around there.
I feel like I could get a guy like Dalvin Cook who might not have the same upside as Christian McCaffrey, but might be a little more consistent week to week. And I don't have to reach for him. I probably will let McCaffrey go to somebody else.
So, like, you say that about Dalvin Cook, like, I feel like Minnesota's more invested in Latavius Murray than Carolina is with Jonathan Stewart. But we kind of all you guys hate Latavius Murray. I liked him up until this last year. Now I've broken up with him, and I'm on board with you. But Minnesota, just their line's horrible. Like,
yeah, again, you went after one of the top running backs in the class. You don't like Jerick McKinnon, obviously, even though he's still there. He's a forgotten man. Like, I mean, he's still there, but I don't even know what his role is going to be if he even makes the team. And I think that Latavius Murray is there, but because, they signed him before they got Cook. So now I think they have this situation where they've got a guy that, okay, honestly, they'd rather have Cook out there. And I think that eventually it's going to be Cook that's out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Carolina did the same thing with Stewart. Like, they brought him back before the draft, so I just don't see really where there's that big a difference. Whereas McCaffrey was drafted in the number 8th overall, Dalvin Cook fell all the way down to the 2nd round.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think that, but we're still kind of talking about the value. Where are you going to get your best value? And I think that especially in dynasty formats, you're going to be looking at, okay, where can I get guys that are good for me right now, and where can I get guys later on in a possible starting running back? If you can get somebody in the 4th round or something like that, if you've gotten a couple of pieces. Now, this is another reason I probably won't have Dalvin Cook either, because in the 4th round, I'm going to be looking at wide receiver. Well, I'm going to be going at so I mean,
right now, Dalvin Cook's ADP on the fantasy football calculator is 6th round.
Oh, geez, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Beginning of the 6th, but still.
Then my mistake. That I feel much more comfortable about, because I can sit on a 6th round pick if I'm doing dynasty format. I can sit on that 6th round pick for a little while to see if it develops, because I can go in, hopefully I've already gotten a couple of guys that I don't have to worry about that pick. I can let it sit. And then afterward, I can pick up a couple of pieces that can fill in if that pick doesn't pan out. So,
yeah. How do you feel about that?
Alex, is there any situation where you might start Bishop Sankey, the current running back for the Vikings, or over any of those guys we just named?
Oh man, I think that if they went back to their old stadium and the roof collapsed again, maybe, because that means that all the other players are dead. I didn't even know that Bishop Sankey was on Minnesota.
I didn't know that until today either.
Wow.
But I really like Dalvin Cook, actually. I don't like him quite as much as McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey is just much more polished in every single aspect. He's one of the most NFL-ready running backs. He had one of the best combines, and I just think any situation you put him in, he's going to handle it, and he's going to produce for you fantasy-wise in all aspects. Unfortunately, he went to Carolina.
Yeah.
And that was one of the worst situations he could have gone to. But everything I'm hearing is it sounds like Carolina just wants to switch up their offense completely. Like they just want to do something completely different. And Cam Newton, he says he's not the only playmaker anymore on the team.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to get the ball into other playmakers' hands. So it almost seems like this transition that they're making on offense, and Christian McCaffrey could thrive if he is given the ball 15, 20 times a game. Yep. So we'll see what happens. Yep. But Dalvin Cook, the only thing I love Dalvin Cook, but the only thing that I get caught up on is they just signed Latavius Murray, like Romine was just saying, and they signed him to a big contract. So he's going to take a lot of those touches away. And
other than Fournette, it's just like all these guys went to the worst teams they possibly could go to. And that's why I like, going back, that's why I like a guy like Pirine, because he went to a team that is actually useful, and he's way down. Like, you can get him at great value. And I think that's what you got to look at too, is just like, these guys went to teams that, the first round players, early second round players that went to the wrong team. Are you going to invest that high in some of these players and not really feel great about the teams that they're on? So,
but like you said, like this is the point in the draft where you start looking at these players and they all have question marks. It's just kind of depending on which question marks bother you the most. And that's where it's going to differ from fantasy player to fantasy player. There's a guy that you may feel comfortable with. Like, I was kind of looking at our top 24, which we're going to wrap up the show here very shortly. So we will be doing another running back episode next week.
Yes.
I have Derrick Henry, and I did my rankings dynasty, a little bit more dynasty heavy, I think, than you guys did. But I have Derrick Henry all the way up number 18th. And I think you all pretty much have him right around in the 30s.
I questioned how low I had him. I really did. Because I like him better than – I mean, right now I have him below Adrian Peterson. That's not correct at all. I like him way better. Paul Perkins. I like Derrick Henry more than that. I like Derrick Henry more than Ty Montgomery. I'm going before we do our draft or our next running back show. He will be higher because honestly, if I'm looking at this, it's like, okay, Dalvin Cook, Bilal Powell. I think I might like Doug Martin still better than Derrick Henry, even with the suspension. But after that, like Gillislee, absolutely not. Paul Perkins, no. I think, honestly, that Derrick Henry is probably more around the 23-24 mark for me. The more I'm looking at this.
See, I almost put Derrick Henry up there. Yeah, I guess I could see that. Like LeGarrette Blount, Dalvin Cook, Amir Abdul. Derrick Henry, I feel like, is one DeMarco Murray injury away from being a stud.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
I would agree, but until that happens, though, the fantasy value of like Paul Perkins, which is probably going to be a starting running back, the fantasy like the points
on one of the worst rushing teams in the league.
I understand that, but he's a starting running back, whereas Derrick Henry's a backup right now. So like that's why I feel that Paul Perkins has more fantasy value at this point. I'm not saying that I think Derrick Henry has more talent than Paul Perkins, but the opportunity for Paul Perkins is higher than it is for Derrick Henry, and so that's why I think he should be higher.
I don't know, man. Like I feel like Tennessee's going to use Derrick Henry this year. Like it's not like he has no value.
I didn't say he had no value. I said I think Paul Perkins has more value because he's actually a starting running back, and things change, and we know Paul Perkins may not be it. So then Derrick Henry go. It just at this point in time, though, is what I'm saying. Though I feel that Paul Perkins is a higher value because he is a starter essentially, and Derrick Henry is a backup at this point.
So how would you define Latavius Murray and Dalvin Cook then? Both of which you have like 8 spots above them.
But I feel the opportunity Dalvin Cook's going to take over a role because Paul Perkins has really nobody behind him. If Derrick Henry had like a Latavius Murray ahead of him, I'd have Derrick Henry higher than him because I feel that going into the season he has a better where they drafted Dalvin Cook in the draft and where they see him going. I see that him taking over the role for it. But as Paul Perkins really has nobody pushing him behind him. Derrick Henry has DeMarco Murray in front of him.
Pull up their stats though. Now, granted, this is when Paul Perkins was a backup. So when they were on the same thing, but their stat line is very similar, except for Derrick Henry had 5 touchdowns. And I think that Derrick Henry has even more opportunity. And okay, let's just say that Paul Perkins finishes the year, starts all 16 games, and is as a starter. And Derrick Henry plays all 16 games and is a backup. I think Derrick Henry will still have more touchdowns. I don't yardage wise is obviously will be an issue because of amount of carries and things like that. I think that Derrick Henry will end up with more touchdowns than Paul Perkins, regardless. I just think that Georgetown, my gosh, the Giants. I don't even know where that came from. I think the Giants running game, yes, the Giants running game is so poor that I don't see a lot of touchdown value. So if you're not, PPR, if you're in a standard league, I almost think that Derrick Henry would be a better pick than Paul Perkins.
Are we talking total touchdowns?
I'm talking total touchdowns, yes.
I'll take that bet.
Ooh.
I'll go Paul Perkins, total touchdowns over Derrick Henry total touchdowns 2017.
Okay.
Alex?
Okay. I love it. Oh, I'm down. I love that.
Put it
I
on
love
the
that
board.
pick. I love that pick. Is this
Brent,
our
do you have
first
more
one?
insight?
Is this our first one?
Maybe.
Brent,
Yeah, this is our first one.
You have more insight about this?
I like Paul Perkins. I think he's got a 3-down skill set, so I think he's going to be involved in the passing game. I think he's going to be involved in the red zone. I just think there's more opportunity for Paul Perkins than Derrick Henry. But regardless, I think it's still going to be close, but I still think Paul Perkins edges it out in 16 games.
Brent, I just disagree with you, man.
Thank you, Brent.
I feel
that have knowledgeable seats on this podcast.
I feel like the Giants are going to try to hide their starting running back a little bit more, though.
Yep.
But I think that they
over who?
They're going to hide
Wayne
him.
Gallman?
No, I don't. That's what I'm saying, though.
No,
I don't think they're going to utilize him.
They can't run the ball.
Do we want to
run the ball?
Do we want to make this a tantrum bet?
A tantrum?
A tantrum,
Tandem, you mean?
Tandem.
I want to make it a tantrum.
What's a tantrum?
Tantric.
Can I make it a
Tantric bet.
I just I feel like the Giants are going to pull Perkins out on second. They're going to use Shane Vereen. Like he will be used, maybe not to rush the ball that much. I just don't think that Paul Perkins is. They're definitely not going to have him be a focal point of that offense for sure.
Honestly, I'm a little shocked that Brent likes Paul Perkins so much because I don't think he's a very good running back. I just really don't.
What do you like about him, other than the fact that he's the starter right now?
It's mainly because he's the starter. He can catch the ball, and he's very elusive. He breaks tackles and can get yards after contact. So
he's not going to catch that much, though. Like Shane Vereen is an awesome catcher.
But
but look how old Shane Vereen is.
Yeah,
But the thing is that even as backups, you still had with basically the same amount of touches. You had Paul Perkins at a 4.1, which is mediocre, and you had Derrick Henry that was a 4.5, which is pretty good.
Yep.
So I don't see where
I'm not denying Derrick Henry. He has a way better offensive line. I think it's going to be close, but I think Paul Perkins edges it out.
Just because he's got the opportunity more opportunity than Derrick Henry does. So we both said it. Derrick Henry has more talent. It's just the opportunity. Paul Perkins.
I would rather have the second guy on a great running team than the number one guy on one of the worst running teams in the league.
Brent, I'm just like Alex. I'm very surprised that you feel the same way because the Giants are terrible and Tennessee's line is awesome. Did you say that Shane Vereen was old? By the way,
yeah,
he's not old. He literally just turned 28.
Oh, I thought he was 29 this season.
And he's more of a wide receiver, so he's not as old. I mean, he is injury prone, but he's not like a between the tackle.
Everything the Giants have done is to make their passing game better, which their defense is pretty good. So you would think that they would want to invest more into their running game, but they're not. And
that's why I made the bet total touchdowns and not rushing touchdowns.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I still honestly I knew that's where you were getting at, and I still think that total
that's
touchdowns.
The only reason
that Derrick Henry.
I see Paul Perkins scoring 4 times this year and Derrick Henry scoring 5. That's personally how I see it working out. And I could see Derrick Henry scoring more than that even, especially if Murray stays healthy all year. I think that's his floor is 5. Yeah, I feel like I could see him scoring double digits if
I was going to say, honestly, I could see Derrick Henry, even with DeMarco Murray still being there, I could see somehow Derrick Henry ending with 10 touchdowns. I could totally see it.
I mean, Tennessee has talked about how they want to use him more and get him out there. They definitely don't want to use DeMarco Murray in those kind of situations. I would think that they would want to be using their future a little bit more. But I don't know. I would take that bet as well on Alex's side all day long. So,
can we put it on the board?
Put it on the board.
It's on. I'm retitling all of the bet things because I don't want it to get lost in the. Because
when I win this year, you mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely not. The only thing is that the one that I am worried about, it's like Samjay Perine will finish the season better than Dalvin Cook. You made that bet. I'm like, oh. I don't like that one very much.
That's the only one you're worried about?
Well, I mean, okay, the QB won't be drafted in the before 15. I already lost, but Isaiah, Tyrod Taylor combined passing and rushing for 4,000 yards. That won't happen. Delaney Walker better than Tyler Eifert? Yes, I've got that one.
I don't think it's sure. I think that one's a coin flip.
I don't know. I don't think so.
If I had it all to do over again, like the Tyrod Taylor bet, I was probably a little overzealous on that one.
Having more yards than he's ever had in his entire
career. I would feel a lot better if I set it at 3,700 now. Like looking back on it, I wish I would have taken it back a little bit. But you know what? I'm bold. That's what I like to do. My rankings aren't bold.
I was going to say, unless you're putting him in the rankings, and then you're as vanilla as a white man.
Oh, well, unless you guys have something else to add to this right now, I think that we should wrap up the show. Next week, we'll start out and kind of talk about the bottom 24 and on. So it should be some exciting talk. But like I led into the show, follow us on Twitter, guys. 4 Horsemen Pod. Send us that email. Somebody's got to get a koozie. I know somebody wants it. We got listeners. If you're still listening right now, send an email, 4horsemenpod@gmail.com. Ask me a question. Just tell me you want the koozie. I don't care. I want emails. I want people to interact with us. We are here for you.
You know what you should do real quick, Roman? You should make because we have, the number. It's the number 4. Like 4. Number 4. You should also make 4 Horsemen Pod spelled out, just so there is no issue ever.
Sure, I'll do that.
And then you can just forward that one to the 4 Horsemen one.
That's a great idea. I'll do that after the show.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I would still appreciate everybody sending it to the correct one. But Alex, I like what you've done there. So
just fix any issues at all.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next week with the second half. Peace.
Boo.